told me I only had about 10 minutes. I said, I'm going to trim it down to what's the most important. So we're going to rewind in history, and we're going to go back all the way back to about 1303. Many of us have heard of the African ruler Mansa Musa. So can you raise your hand if you've heard of Mansa Musa? What many people don't know is that he had a predecessor. His name was Mansa Muhammad. And Mansa Muhammad in 1303, this is documented, left West Africa, and he said, I want to see what's on the other side of the Atlantic. So in 1303, a Muslim West African traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to never be seen again in the papyrus ships, but he never returned. It wasn't until later that proof of his journey making it to the Americas was seen. So we fast forward a little bit in American in history to the transatlantic slave trade, beginning in the 1400s, really getting popular in the 15 and the 1600s, where we know of the captured prisoners of war, not slaves, but captured prisoners of war that were taken from the west coast of Africa and brought to the Americas, that European historians say anywhere from 30 to 35% of those people were Muslim. From the African perspective, the African historians say anywhere from 70 to 80% were Muslim. Now, it depends on where you get your history from. You can decide, but the point is that historically, anywhere from 15 to 20 million souls were carried across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. So if we go by European history, we're still talking about multiple, let's say about, what would that be? About 6 million Muslims came to the Americas through the transatlantic slave trade. Okay? And so what this is saying is that Islam, Muslims, their bones are buried here in this country.
Yeah.
Islam is not anything that is new to this country. And even of the Columbian trade, right, the Columbian slave route, Christopher Columbus, in his journal, he mentions of people falling down on their face similar to the Moors that he knew of in the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain. So this is an account in his journals. Islam is not new to the Americas. Let's fast forward a little bit more into 1754. In England, a young, fresh out of college law student named Thomas Jefferson goes into a bookstore and is looking for legal law books. And he comes across an early translation of the Quran in this bookstore in England, and he purchases it. And as we know, Thomas Jefferson is probably, without doubt, well, it's arguable, one of the most influential founding fathers in American history. For those of us that have read and studied the Quran, and for those of us that have read and studied the Constitution, it is without a shadow of a doubt that the Constitution was influenced by the Quran, without a shadow of a doubt. And knowing that Thomas Jefferson, the main writer of the Constitution, purchased the law book in 1754 as a young attorney, right? We have to say that Islam is as American as apple pie.
That's right.
Without a shot, this is historical fact.
That's right.
Of the understanding of Islam in America. Let's fast forward a little bit more, okay, into the early 1900s, where you have amongst the progressive thinking Africans, African Americans, that began the Pan-African movement, having a relationship with Africa, people that we know of as Marcus Garvey with his Black Star Line cruise ships taking Americans from, of course, America to Africa. In his same office in New York, in Marcus Garvey's office in New York, he shared it with a Sudanese Egyptian Muslim called Duse Muhammad Ali. And from many of the teachings of Duse Muhammad, right? During this time of the Pan-African movement, you begin to see a form of Islam establish itself in the United States, particularly behind what we call behind the veil. Okay, so behind the veil is in the black community in the United States. So you start to see the Nation of Islam with Elijah Poole, eventually Elijah Muhammad, established in Detroit and then moving to Chicago. You start to see Noble Drew Ali with the Moorish Science Temple. You start to see the Ahmadi movement in New York City. A form of Islam, right? But kind of deviating in this way or that way. At the same time, you have a strong Sunni Islam movement in the cities behind the veil. Islam is not a new occurrence to American history. Continuing on with the fights that we have in the 60-minute presentation, that hate produced, which is the
Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace with the introduction of the Nation of Islam to the vast majority of Americans, and the civil rights movement, fighting for equality for all people. Okay? And so the major event of the civil rights movement is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But also connected to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the Immigration Act of 1965,
right,
which stopped the illegal, right, and segregating properties of immigration. So then in 1965, we begin to see our brothers, Muslim brothers from Asia, from the Middle East, from Eastern and South Europe, from Africa, begin to come to the United States in mass. And for the last 50 plus years, we have seen this influx, and it's still that goes on today, to see this beautiful tapestry of Islam in America. So the point that I want to express to you, and it's very important that we know our history, our Muslim bones are buried in this ground and have been buried in this ground for over 500 years. Islam is nothing new to America. And so we have to express that Islam is woven within the fabric of United States and United States history. Thank you.
All right, brother. You're not going to run. Takbir.